Back in session with Professor P. I hope you guys are staying safe and healthy. Today we're going to talk about your favorite thing, food getting activities and food strategies. Remember, follow along with your concept sheets. They're in your modules. You could print them out and we'll be going over each term, so it makes it quite easy. All right, let's talk about food. Some of you are probably eating while you're watching this. All right, food getting activities are very important for survival. It's important, and food is related to all aspects of society. It's your community size, your economics. It's about inequality and quality. We're looking at politics. It's involved in art. All of these kinds of things are very important. Food is really related to all aspects of culture and all aspects of society, right? And it becomes important even toward the end of the semester when we talk about global problems. We're going to talk about things like famine and, lack of food. All right, let's get to it. Let's start with one of our first concepts of food collection. We were food collectors for 99% of human history. Food collectors is this: we're dependent on the natural environment. We're hunting, we're gathering, we're walking, we're picking, we're eating berries and vegetation. That becomes very important because when we looked at food collectors historically, we existed in all society. Now food collectors are a part of our world still, but they're a very small portion of our society and that are left in the world. And we have to be cautious when we're studying them because today they're really relegated, right, to certain environments only. Historically, that's what we were. All right, the Aborigines and the Inuit are two societies that they use as an example in your book to represent food collectors today, and they live in two different kinds of environments. What are some of the general features of food collectors? They're hunters, they're gatherers, maybe fishers, maybe scavengers. They have no real political life. Everything's egalitarian. Egalitarian means equal access. Everybody in the society will get part of the food. That becomes very important to sort of understand. When we look at food collectors, we look at a nomadic lifestyle. We look at no permanent residency. There's no class division. Nobody has more or less within these societies. And they actually only work anywhere between 14 and 18 hours a week because they only do food collecting. They do a lot of socialization and storytelling and all of this great stuff. About 10,000 years ago, we turned to food production. Food production is really the cultivation and domestication of plants and animals. Now we're manipulating the environment, right? We're doing something. We're planting. We're doing all these different kinds of things. Number it on your concept sheet, but there's 3 different types of food production systems. And I put it down there. Horticulturalism, horticulture. Number 2, intensive agriculture, which is our society. And number 3, pastoralism. Let's get to horticulturalism. Horticulturalism is really growing crops with simple tools and methods. So hand tools, digging sticks, machetes. Really, we look at an extensive and shifting cultivation, which is a slash and burn technology. Horticulturalists are sort of like natural ecologists, so they stay on a plot of land for 2 to 3 years. They grow their crops, and then they slash and burn it to get all the nutrients back in the soil, and then they move along. They're what we call semi-nomadic or semi-sedentary, which means they are partially doing this, right? So they're not fully nomadic, but they'll stay in a certain place for a few years and then move along, right? They don't ever want to overuse the environment as well. Remember, slash burn technology is that extensive and shifting cultivation. The Yanomamo and the Samoans are the ones that they use in your book as representing horticulturalists. What are some of the general features of horticulturalists? Simple tools, partially nomads. What's very important too, with horticulturalists, because they begin to grow, they have a little bit of a surplus, so small signs of social stratification emerge. Small signs of classes start to emerge because guess what? Once you start growing, I may have a little less, you may have a little more, and we start to have a little bit of division depending on how much people are having, right? Okay, let's get to us, intensive agriculturalists. We live in an intensive agricultural society. Our society depends on food production, right? And we do it intensively, which means this: we cultivate permanent fields, tractors, fertilization, pesticides, crop rotation, water irrigation, and none of us know about food. We don't have to because we go to the stores to get it. We don't have to understand the process at all, right, within the system. The system is based on capitalism, corporations, partner owned, right? It becomes intensive to understand because it's based on mechanization and machinery, right? It's a very big system, right? That becomes important. They use rural Greece as an example. What do we get from Greece? One of my favorite things, grapes for wine, right? One of my least favorite things, tobacco for, cigarettes, smoking, and things like that. Cash cropping means this: you're raising crops for pure sale into the market. Doesn't mean the crops are always going to be good. It just means you're not going to be growing for your individual families, right? You're going to be growing for the supermarkets. That becomes quite important to understand because it's related to an intensive agricultural system. All right. Wet rice cultivation is another example of our system, right? So rice comes from where? Asia. And when we look at the system, wet rice cultivation is an intensive system. And what they're really talking about there is that it's not only representative of a complex system of irrigation, but that there's defined socioeconomic roles with that. Landlords, tenants, laborers, right? And then they export it, right, out into other areas of the world. So that becomes very important. What are some of the general features of intensive agricultural societies like ours? We work long hours. We live in towns. We live in cities. We have a complex political system, right? We rely on crops. We rely on grocery stores, right? It becomes important to understand that we also face food shortages because there's no crop diversity, and we rely on food all over the world. So let's just think. You remember many years ago, you guys are probably kids, when China has its earthquake or a natural disaster, we're not going to get access to rice. Rice is going to not only be expensive, it's going to be hard to get. We live in a system that's based on commercialization, right? Commercialization is where you're buying and selling in an open market, right? That makes the whole society a little bit different. We're also what's called market foragers. Market foragers is basically we collect our food from the supermarket. Think about for a minute all the grocery stores you or your parents shop at and why. Costco for bulk. Trader Joe's because you think it's healthier and you're getting organic, right? And you're getting natural. Sprouts for the same reason. Safeway maybe because of geography. Maybe because it offers other services like Starbucks in it, right? Or bakeries. Winco because it's cheap, right? Food Max maybe because it's cheap. Some of you might be going to the dollar store because it's right next to the Brentwood campus, right? So all of these kinds of things. As market foragers, we understand money more than we understand the process of food. Right? That becomes quite important to understand. Market foragers, some of us are shopping or your parents are shopping at multiple grocery stores and supermarkets to get the goods that they need. All right, let's move on to the third food production system, pastoralism. Pastoralism is just the domestication of animals, period. Relying on animals. Most pastorals don't kill their animals. They rely on them for their products, all right? In the book, they look at the Basari. They're located in Iran, and the Basari were nomads, and they were given rights by the government to sort of herd their flocks, right? And they had access to like the waterways and the grasses and things like that. Because of warfare, their lifestyle has really just disappeared, right? And many of them are homeless now on the streets. They use the Lapps as another example, reindeer herders. And it becomes important just to understand what are some of the general features of pastorals is not only are they herding animals, they rely on trade with the other people in the other food production system for the products, right? So that becomes important. They typically live in pastoral families, so they might have like a shepherd boy, right? And they do what's quite interesting, intensive and extensive systems. So intensive, so their flocks are either under surveillance around a fence or their flocks roam the land, right, as an extensive system, and then they send their shepherds and their shepherd boys out. They typically, like I said, live in families, and they use trade for necessity. Why and what are the origins of food production? Origins of food production are typically associated with population growth. We had to start producing food once we started to grow, right, and society started to grow. But also, trade and reciprocity becomes insignificant, right? We're not reciprocal anymore. So now we have to rely on our systems to buy food, right? It becomes very important to understand that once our population starts to grow and we have population density and population growth locally and globally, we need to start to produce food, right? That becomes very important. Well, I hope you guys finish eating, and I hope you guys learned about a little bit. Think about how food plays a big role in your life culturally, right? And going to the supermarkets. All right. Have a good day. Enjoy your food for the day.